8 Facts You Didn't Know About Jerome Powell. Jerome Powell is the chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States. As the current chairman of the Fed, Jerome Powell is presiding over a very important period in the history of the U.S. economy. During his incumbency, he saw the world go through COVID-19 and the first global recession since the 2008 financial crisis. Whenever Powell opens his mouth, the stock market skyrockets or falls to the abyss. Anyone with even a passing interest in economics is forced to listen carefully to what he has to say. 1. He was actually supposed to be a lawyer. Powell was born in 1953 in Washington, D.C. He had a good upbringing since his father was a lawyer, and his grandfather was dean at a law school. His parents and Jerome Powell all grew up in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., and Powell continues to live there today. After graduating Georgetown Preparatory School, an elite boarding school that produced numerous politicians and lawyers, he received a Bachelor of Arts in Politics from Princeton University in 1975. He spent a year as a legislative assistant to a U.S. senator, then earned a Juris Doctor degree from Georgetown University Law School in 1979. 2. Career change. Powell moved to New York City and practiced law, but later he decided to move to investment banking and work for several financial institutions. He had ups and downs. One of the institutions he worked for went bankrupt, but Powell kept climbing up the ladder and also briefly served for the Secretary of the Treasury under President George Bush. Powell also had talent in entrepreneurship and founded Severn Capital Partners, a private investment firm that invests in companies that make shelters and safety products against chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear hazards. He is probably the only FRB chair to be prepared for World War III. 3. He served for the government with a wage of $1. After having fun within the investment field, he went to work at a place called the Bipartisan Policy Center in Washington, D.C. This place is like a school for smart people who try to think of ideas to help the country. Powell's job was to help convince the people who make laws in the U.S., the Congress, to agree to let the government borrow more money to pay for things it needed, like schools and hospitals. In 2011, there was a big problem because some people in Congress didn't want to let the government borrow more money, and if they didn't agree, it could have hurt the economy and made it harder for people to borrow money. Powell had no formal role in government, but helped explain why it was important to raise the amount of money the government could borrow. Not doing so could have had bad consequences for the economy and the interest rates that people pay to borrow money. Despite playing an important role, Powell only asked to be paid $1 for his salary each year because he wanted to help the country without worrying about making a lot of money for himself. 4. Being nominated as the Fed chair. Powell is the first non-economist to become the Fed chair in 40 years without a graduate education in economics. His private sector experience and work in investment banking and private equity led to him becoming the wealthiest Fed chair nominee since 1948. He is said to have a personal fortune of $60 million. Despite this, Powell was a broadly uncontroversial pick for Fed chair. He was nominated to the position by President Donald Trump on November 2, 2017. Wall Street experts say his nomination was expected and, in fact, was the boring, orthodox choice. 5. Survived both Republican and Democrat regimes. He initially became a member of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors after being nominated to the post by President Barack Obama in 2012, and he was subsequently elevated to chairman by President Donald Trump. He was renominated as chair by President Joe Biden despite being a registered Republican. Powell's good reputation in Washington as a consensus builder and problem solver served him well. He received bipartisan praise for the actions taken by the Federal Reserve in early 2020 to combat the financial effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. He basically pumped out an unforeseen amount of monetary stimulus to prevent the economy from sinking. Critics say this created a disconnect between asset prices and the economy. But Powell responded by arguing that stable prices and full employment outweighed concern over high asset prices. 6. Popping the bubble. Powell insisted that inflation is transitory, but later conceded that inflation was spiraling out of control after supplying too much money in the market. Now he has taken a full U-turn and is threatening the market that he will happily raise interest rates while tanking the economy. This is causing the global economy to fall into another recession, and the shockwaves of bankruptcy are spreading out to the entire world. His current role model is said to be Paul Volcker, who was his predecessor during the oil crisis in the 1970s, and the guy who used to sleep with a gun under his pillow because he received so many death threats. 7. Countless memes. Although Powell is known as a boring profile, he has become popular among young investors due to the Federal Reserve's quantitative easing and tightening efforts during the COVID-19 pandemic. Young investors on forums like Reddit's Wall Street Bets have crafted memes about Powell, referring to him as J. Powell. One popular meme titled "Money Printer Go Burr" has garnered over 1.2 million views on YouTube. Powell's recent hawkishness on the stock market has generated countless memes around the world. 8. Mr. Nice Guy. But overall, Powell could be seen as your friendly neighborhood nice guy who likes to be called Jay over Jerry, who enjoys cycling, golf, and guitar. Powell has a unique ability to repeat sentences backward, a skill that has impressed young staff members at the central bank. He has a reputation for being a decent human being, exemplified by an anecdote of him helping a family at an airport with their luggage to ensure they made their connecting flight. That's all we have for today. If you learned any new facts, give this video a like. And if you enjoy the content, make sure to subscribe to support us and not miss the next upload. Until the next one, capitalists.